Hey, welcome back to the Bootstrap Cabinet Shop. Wanted to start off by saying that I am sorry that I have not made a video in 11 months. Um, I've actually gotten some people who commented on the video that I first did who've given me some nice feedback, who've really been generous, and who are encouraging me to do more. And I want to do more, and so that's why I'm here with you today. Um, what we're going to be talking about today in the Bootstrap Shop is equipment essentials. Now, this video is probably going to be a little bit more of a long format style video, just to help me with editing and things like that. There's a lot of information we're going to cover, but I'm going to try to be concise and not get lost going down rabbit holes and talking about a whole bunch of different things. So one of the first things we want to talk about in the Bootstrap Shop is equipment. And number one on the list is going to be the table saw. Now, I know in YouTube and online, we see a lot of guys that have a lot of really nice saws, right? They have a tricked out saw stop, they got Powermatics, and they've got a lot of really nice saws. But I'm here to tell you that it's not really necessary. Now, I will have to say the saw stops are really nice just for safety. So if you're going to be working in a shop where you got employees, I can understand that. But for us, it's going to be single man, two man shops, right? So what we're looking at is what is the, I guess the minimum saw that you can get if you don't already have a saw. Now, if you have a saw, you can kind of skip through this. We will be talking about this slider extension a little bit later on in the video. But for right now, we're going to be talking about what kind of table saw do I need to get. Now, this saw right here, this is a Grizzly hybrid cabinet saw. Now, why they call it a hybrid is it's not quite like a full-blown cabinet saw in dimensions or weight. This is kind of a blending between a contractor saw, which is very lightweight, usually doesn't have a cabinet enclosed base, usually has legs on it. And this is a combination of that and a cabinet saw. So with a contractor saw, we'll start off with that. You may be familiar with some of the old Sears Craftsman saws that have the little sheet metal legs. They have the extension wings out on the side that are not solid, or if they are solid, they're just sheet metal. They'll usually have a cast iron center, and some of those old saws got the motor hanging out the back, and they're a lightweight option. They're heavy enough to handle plywood and heavier materials, more so than what you would with a job site saw, but they're not as beefy or usually quite as nice as a cabinet saw. Now, those are an excellent option still. When you're starting out, there's nothing wrong with having one of those. And then actually, if you can find one for a good deal online, I even started with one of those old Craftsman saws. There's nothing wrong with getting a saw. Get what you can afford and that you can put a little bit of money into to fix up and kind of make a better saw. This saw right here is, like as I was saying, is a hybrid saw. So it has about a 27-inch deep table. That's a little bit smaller than a lot of cabinet saws. A lot of cabinet saws are full 30-inch depth. But this one's got a little bit more weight. It's 2 horsepower as opposed to maybe like a 1 1/4 or a 1 horsepower and some of the contractor saws. So it's got a little bit more oomph, a little bit more options. The big thing, you can find a saw like this on Facebook Marketplace for about $1,000, and it's ready to go. You can take it home. I looked these up just a couple days ago, so these are current prices as of, well, let's see, it's November 2025, right? So you can find a used one of these saws about $1,000. If you're looking for a contractor saw, you could probably find a used one anywhere from $300 for an old Craftsman saw that's in decent shape, up to $700 will buy you a brand new box store rigid or Delta contractor saw. The big thing with these, though, is no matter what saw you get or what you have, you want to look at something that's got a good fence system, okay? And I know that can kind of be hard looking up like, hey, what is a good fence system? Really, we want something that's going to be basically just beefy, right? You want something that has some meat on it. The old Sears saws have a terrible fence system, right? A lot of times you'll see saws that on the cheaper side are not a I guess you would call it like a Biesemeyer fence style saw or a T-square saw fence. And so what that means, like this fence right here, this squares off of this piece of steel here on the bottom. So to make adjustments to how square this is with the tabletop and with your blade, you can make adjustments on these slides here that are mounted on the bottom of this. And so this is a Biesemeyer style fence. This is pretty much what you want. So it locks on the back end, it squares off the back end, And on the front, it just hangs, right? There's nothing there really holding it down. It's not locked in or anything. And that's totally fine. These are very reliable fences and they're very good. The biggest thing is definitely, make sure you have a decent fence. But other than that, buying used, you can clean up rusty tops. You can replace bearings and motors if you're kind of a handy person. And, a lot of cabinet guys are pretty mechanically inclined. So that's why I say these things. You can find a saw that maybe has seen better days and, maybe it's worth it. Maybe save yourself, $500 or something like that, buying one of these that somebody left out in the shed and it's just got a rusty top on it. Maybe it needs new bearings. Um, so, I would avoid job site saws. Job site saws really don't quite have the weight or the power that we're looking for. They don't have the adjustability with being able to set the saw up. This saw has fully adjustable trunnions underneath, so I can square the blade and get everything nice and perpendicular and in line. Now, moving on to this slider attachment. This guy, I've had him for probably about 3 years. This is a really good slider attachment. Actually, I've been working on some plans for this for an updated version. So I'm not going to say that this version right here is the best thing since sliced bread, but I'm going to have to say when I update this, it's probably going to be one of the best sliders on YouTube. I'm really pretty happy with this. This guy right here is home built, obviously, right? I just made this thing out of scraps of plywood that I've had sitting around. I had to build my own rail. Linear guides weren't cheap when I built this. They were still a little bit out of my budget. I've got a Craig aluminum flip style fence here that is really nice, but in all honesty, you don't have to have this. You can replicate this same thing with any style of flip stop that you want, and by simply just grooving a T-slot into the top of this piece of wood here. It's just an L-style fence, right? But it's really handy to have this nice Craig system on here because it's just fast to install it, and it's durable and it's tough, and you can flip this up, flip it down. Now, the key features of this are obviously, right, we've got about 54 inches of cross-cut capacity. So I can cross-cut a full sheet of plywood with this. When we are making rip cuts and this fence would be in the way, we can extend this guy all the way back. And if that's not quite enough, I have a lock mechanism here that lifts up, a little toggle clamp. I can spin this guy off to the side. Now, this takes care of most of what I'm doing. However, if we're ripping down something even bigger and we need more support or we just need more room, this is actually on a pin, and this thing can be lifted right out. It's got a little pin on the bottom there. So this is actually a pretty nice setup. I spent, a good bit of time figuring this guy out. When this is in place, we actually have a stop here that is a bolt. Okay. When this fence is in place, I actually have a bolt here that acts as the stop. So this will pivot on this pin, and it'll come back and it'll rest on that bolt. Now, of course, I'm sure you figured out that the reason why I have that bolt there is so that I can adjust the squareness of this. And having that there has allowed me to be able to get this thing to cut within a 64th of an inch on a 4-foot cross cut. I mean, it's really accurate. I'm sure that looking at it, it may not seem that way because obviously it's built on a wood rail. But if you take your time and do it right, this can be a very cost-effective slider option for you. Now, I will have to say, just the other day, I got digging around on YouTube, and I'm checking up on the slider game because I have held for a long time that this was probably the best slider that I've ever seen as far as the DIY options go. I never really saw anything on YouTube that I thought was better. I saw guys making all kinds of different stuff, and I'm pretty opinionated. However, recently I have discovered that you can go on Vevor, and if you're not familiar with Vevor, it's kind of like online Harbor Freight. It's got some cheap Chinese tools, but they sell linear 20 millimeter linear rails that are 86 and a half inches. Yeah, 86 and a half inches, 220 centimeter tracks. You can get 2 of those rails with 4 guide bearings to go on each rail, right? You can get that whole thing shipped to your door for $100, which is crazy. Now, some people say that, oh, I bought it and there was an issue with the bearing or whatever, it doesn't matter. You call them up and you say, hey, I've got a problem. They're going to send you another one. So for $100 and the potential hassle of having to have something replaced, you just can't beat that. This rail right here is 8 foot, but I had to build it. There's a lot of steps involved in this. It just, and I mean, you don't need to do that. So the updated version and the plans I'm working on now are going to have this guy utilizing those steel rails. I mean, it's just going to make it so much cleaner. It's going to make this thing roll. Like, you'll just be able to just push it along. It'll be really sweet. One thing I will have to have that I don't on this one, and I wish I did, is a locking mechanism. If you've ever actually used a real sliding table saw, how those work is oftentimes you can roll these things back and they'll have a lock that'll click in, and it'll keep the slider in place. So that way it doesn't run away when you're trying to load a piece of plywood on it. Now, for those of you who are looking at this and thinking, hey, this looks a little different than the things I'm used to seeing on YouTube, you're probably right. A lot of people on YouTube, and I'm not trying to throw shade on YouTube people. I'm glad they do this stuff because they've given me tons of ideas. But one of the things you'll see that they do a lot is they'll build these sliders and the fence is back here and it's a pusher style. The problem with that, and I think where that comes from, is people using crosscut sleds. So they kind of go, oh, hey, we'll just make a bigger crosscut sled. The issue with that is when you are feeding sheets of plywood on here, it's just hard to have to lift that thing over top, especially when you got a full sheet. When I've got a full 4x8 sheet, I'm coming in here and I'm trying to lay this thing down here, and it's actually difficult. I have to kind of flop it on here. It's a little awkward. My arms aren't long enough to set it down. And then you got to, jump it around and get it in place. If this fence is in front, right here where I'm putting pieces down in and pushing it through backwards of this, it's a hassle. And I have built sliding attachments, before I've done this one. I have built sliding attachments that were set up like that, and it wasn't convenient. And this is fine for small pieces. Small pieces work on this just fine. This fence is at a right height where I can get my fingers on here. I can pin it up against the fence with my thumbs. It cuts great. Another feature of this that is this is going to depend on your fence system, but it can be adapted. You can make changes to kind of solve this problem. So this fence is an extruded aluminum piece, right? Now, around here somewhere, I don't know where it's at, I have a piece of this that's actually shorter. This fence here is about 4 foot long. I have one of these that's about 3 foot long. And I like that 3 foot one most of the time because I have knobs on the back of this fence. I can loosen these up. Let's go ahead and scoot this guy over here. But what I can do is I can pull this guy back. Now, if you've used an actual sliding table saw, you'll know what I'm getting at here. The importance of this is so that if we are cutting a piece, let me grab a chunk of wood here. If we are cutting a piece of material here and we want to put it up against the fence, if our fence is fully extended, we get into a situation where that off-cut piece is sitting between a spinning blade and a fence, and there is no clearance. There is no room there. And so that can be very bad. It can, shoot that thing back at the wall or back at you. Now, sliding table saws, if you actually go buy a real slider, they have clamps like that on their fences so you can slide them back like this. And the reason being is so that you put it up against it, and then as you make this cut, by the time you have cleared the fence, you have indexed your part up against it, right? You've got it where you need to be. You make the cut. You then have about, I got 1.5 inches or so there of space, and I don't have to worry about that piece shooting out the back. Now you might be like, Josh, well, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just set your adjustable stop? Well, if I'm cutting an 8-foot piece of material, I can't cut to this side by using this stop because I'll hit the wall. And I don't want to put this thing out on the floor because I have limited space anyway. And that's kind of our idea here. A lot of you guys are talking about, hey, I'm going to start a small shop. And so space is at a premium, right? So I have realized that I don't need to have a huge 54-inch cut capacity on my saw. Actually, what I have right now is I can do, I think, 3 foot. I'm not exactly sure. Let me just check. Let me check. If I push this thing all the way over here, it's a little hard to see. I can do 3 foot, all right? Now, you're probably not going to really need that much capacity. The critical number is the depth of your cabinet uprights, right? So, most cabinets are 24 inches deep, right? That's pretty much the limit. You may have a situation where you need something to be a little bit extra deep, and in that case, and it'll be rare cases, right? But in that case, you know, I'm able to rip up to 3 foot. If I, for some reason, needed a cabinet side 3 feet deep, which I just don't ever see that. But back to what I was saying about cutting with the fence here versus here. If we have this guy set to cut, who knows, we need to make several 12-inch cuts or something like that. I can come in here. I can take a strip that's 8 foot long and it can hang off this side. I can come in here. I can make the cut, of course, on my slider, right? I can make the cut and then I can bring this back, move my piece over and make another cut and just keep pushing pieces down off the end of the table there. And that's really convenient. Now, what I tend to like to do, and I may change this, you know, we'll just have to play around with it because I'm learning here just like you are. What I tend to like to do is I'll put a full sheet of plywood on here and I'll make an initial cross cut. I don't usually rip it first. I'll usually make a cross cut. It doesn't matter. Me doing the cross cut is just, we're not going to really get into why. It's just, that's just kind of how it has worked out, you know, me trying to save materials or whatever, because I'm doing maybe a small job here and there. If you're doing a job where you've got, you know, if you're doing like an actual kitchen, or maybe you're doing a bathroom and you're going to be cutting more than just a few, you're cutting more than maybe one vanity or just one little cabinet, you know, it's going to just make sense probably just to go ahead and rip it to width and then take that 8 foot strip and come in here and just knock them down. But that being said, you know, the requirements for the table saw are really, you know, you can start out with that cheap contractor saw, that's fine, but put a good blade on it. You know, put a good blade, put a zero clearance insert. I mean, this stuff's all over YouTube. I'm sure you guys, if you're seeing me, you've probably been digging around in other videos trying to find stuff already, and you've been listening to guys telling you how to set up your saws. There's tons of stuff on there. You probably don't need me to do it, but I will say buy a good blade. And you know what I mean by a good blade? You don't have to spend a ton of money on a blade. I like to run the Freud blades. I do like Freud industrial blades that are full 1/8 inch curve, but you don't have to have that. You can start off with the plain old Home Depot Diablo blades. They're really good. They're like, you know, it's a $40 to $60 blade depending on what you're getting. If you just want an all-purpose blade, you know, get a 40 tooth. You can have them sharpened. You know, right now, I mean, it's still only about $25 to have a blade sharpened, and every place that I know of that does blades will gladly sharpen those Freuds. They cut good, they're cheap, and I mean that's a great starting point. One thing I will mention is with your materials, if you're using like an import birch or a pre-finished birch plywood, I happen to have a piece right here. Let me pull this into frame. This is an Indonesian birch or Vietnamese birch plywood. This is pre-finished on the front, unfinished on the back. One thing I will say is I have had this material in 3/4 inch stock that I have used for shelves, and I thought, oh, this is great. It's pre-finished on both sides, of course, and all I have to do is edge band it, and I've got shelves. That'll really make shelves fast. The problem is cross-cutting this very thin veneer, it chips really easy. And I got to be honest with you, if I was to do it again, I would either use a higher quality plywood that was pre-finished, which would be the better option, or I would use unfinished so that I could sand and possibly even do a little filling and finishing of those chipped edges, because it's very easy to chip out this import plywood. So a good blade, you know, possibly like if you're cross-cutting this material, this particular material, a good like 60 tooth blade is probably what you're going to be looking at. A 40 tooth might chew you up, but the zero clearance insert is the big one. Okay, I think that pretty much covers everything on the table saw for right now. We'll be moving on to some other pieces of equipment here in the video, and I think we'll probably look at doing the router table next. All right, guys. Our next piece of equipment is the router table. So, you know, I went over a lot of stuff and maybe a little too much detail on the table saw over here. So over here is the router table. Now you're going to notice again, it's homemade, right? It's cheap, it's simple, and that's really all we need. So this router table mostly just sees a dado bit. I've got a 1/2 inch bit in there that I use to cut dados. That's probably 90% of the work that gets done on this thing. While I can put other bits, and I have other bits in there, I can make doors on this machine. It's got enough power to do that. However, I'm really avoiding doors. I think I mentioned this in my first video that, you know, our idea in the Bootstrap shop is we're trying to deal with misconceptions, and we're also trying to deal with inefficiencies. So why do I not want to make doors? Well, because other people can make doors way more efficient than I can. If you've made doors on a router before, it's a good thing to try. I mean, if you think that I'm wrong on this, go ahead, make you a set of maple doors, or heck, make you a set of poplar doors, okay? Do that. That's a little easier to cut. And what you're going to find out, there's a lot of labor in doors, okay? And doors need to look good. So that's why we're not using this router, nor do I plan to buy a shaper or anything like that to do doors, because there's just a lot of expense in that. Shapers are expensive. A powder feeder is expensive. You're going to have $3,000 wrapped up in a decent shaper and power feeder, easy. And power feeders aren't something you find used. They are expensive. They're pricey. People know what they have. So if you're looking at a little tiny, what they would call like an 8th horsepower baby power feeder for a shaper, you're still looking at $700 for a used one. So we're staying away from that. So this guy is real simple, right? It has the Bosch 1617 EVS. It is a 2¼ horsepower router. And actually, this fence that I've got here, this isn't the fence that I use on it. This is what I use right here. Set this to the side. This is what I use. You probably can't hardly see that with the camera right there. I use a piece of 1/2-inch plywood, the same stuff we're building cabinet carcasses out of. Now, what I have done is I have gone and attached a piece of hardwood to the back of this table. Move this stuff out of the way here. I've attached a piece of hardwood back here. It's not a specific distance. It's just an arbitrary distance. It's at the back of my table, right? I will then take this piece of plywood. This one is labeled 4¼ inches, and it says toe kick. So when I need to cut out the groove for the floor in my cabinet upright, I will take this guy. I will slap him on here, and through trial and error of measuring the piece that I have, cutting, and coming back and measuring again and making test cuts, I'm back and forth at the table saw 5 or 6 times with this. I have come up with a sort of a gauge block that is 4¼ inches, right? Now, this is just, it's fast. It's really fast. You're not messing with a fence. You're not having to deal with, oh, am I right on the line? Am I slightly off the line? I mean, we all know that when you cut something on the table saw, if you move that fence, getting it back to that spot again is going to be basically impossible unless you got one of those fancy Incra fences with a little, threaded rod that locates it. But this guy will give you just as good of results, right? It's really accurate, it's super repeatable, and that's what we're going for. Because when we're constructing our cabinets, we want our dados to line up. If you have a dado that's a little bit higher in the back, and then the upright's got one that's a little bit lower, and you're trying to make your floor fit into this, and that floor has to be located in this dado all the way around, you're going to have a bad day, right? You're going to be cursing me that I told you to do this if you don't use a good fence setup. So this right here, this is how we execute on that and keep things consistent so that things go together easy. Now this is my little toe kick piece, right? You've already seen that. I've got another one here. Let's pull this out. What do I got here? This one says 1/2-inch back dado, okay? This guy right here is a 1/2-inch offset. This is what I use for cutting out the top ridge on my back, okay? This would be around the top of the cabinet where you would put stretchers across the cabinet uprights. I've got another one in here that is labeled 1/4-inch FF dado. So that's my face frame dado. So I dado my face frames right now. So I'll take my face frame stiles and rails, both. I dado the rails and the stiles. And I will run these things through this, and that will give me an offset that's a perfect 1/4 inch on my face frames. Now I know that I haven't explained how exactly my construction method goes together, and I have SketchUp files that I have drawn all kinds of different cabinets in so that I can kind of quickly design and lay out and get cut lists, and I will share those with everyone. I'm still figuring out how I'm going to share the plans and the files and what the best way is to do that. So be patient with me. We will get there. But anyway, once we lay one of these guys on there, I got these Craig automatic adjusting clamps. These are like the Automax clamps or something. These things are fantastic. I've got a little bit of an overhang here on my table. I just clamp them down. I run my pieces through. I mean, this setup here is great. What we're essentially doing is, if you have ever done your homework or research and seen cabinets that are CNC'd, and specifically the dado type construction, I'm not talking about half blind tenons or anything like that, which is a very nice way to construct cabinets. But again, we don't have a CNC, right? We're doing this by hand. But a dado style construction, all we're doing is just routing dados in there for our floors and our uprights and everything to go together. and this is very fast and it's very cheap, right? The only recommendations I would have for this are, the router plate I have here. This is a Craig router plate. It's plastic. It's really flat. It's really good. I've never had trouble with it warping. That Bosch router that I talked about, I really like it, and the reason why is because it's just the fixed router base. It's not the plunge router. It's the fixed base, but it has a wrench, a little Allen key that I can get in through here in the top. And if I'm adjusting and I don't want to have to stick my hand under there, which is what I usually do, I actually have the option, if I want to adjust this from the top like you would with a fancy router lift, right? So you can pick these things up on pretty much anywhere. Amazon, they're not terribly expensive. They're very good. They're a very good router. Now, if you want a little more power, you can upgrade to a 3¼ horse if that's what you want. That would spin some of your larger bits, but honestly, I don't need to spin larger bits. I'm not cutting raised panels. This router is underpowered for raised panels, but I don't want to do that because, again, I'm not doing doors, okay? I want to buy all my doors. There are guys out there. When I say guys, there is a company near me in Millersburg, Ohio. Actually, it's not near me. It's 2 hours away, but that's basically near me, right, for ordering stuff like that. A company called Mullwoods. It's in Millersburg, Ohio. They have a huge shop with millions of dollars of worth of equipment, and they send you doors that look great. The thing you're going to risk with that is that there's the potential that maybe you're working on a project and they send you a door and something's messed up, which is why I would advise that you try, if you're working on a project, right? If you're doing a cabinet project for someone and you get the money, you get the down payment on it. Obviously, you've already worked up the plans and everything because you've worked up a quote, right? And you're going to want to go ahead and get those doors on order. That's like one of the first things you're going to want to do, get them on order. Now, their turnaround time is usually pretty decent. Before COVID, it was like a 7-day turnaround. I don't know exactly where they're at right now. I think it's about like that. It's about maybe a 7-day order period. The shipping can be a little pricey on them, especially when you're having them shipped to a residence. So, maybe somebody that's got a business address. It's a little cheaper to ship like that. Ooh, about fell over. But if you have a business address, you can ship those doors cheaper usually. And they can just do such a nice job. They can, if you're painting cabinets, right, they're going to send you doors that are either completely sanded and ready for primer, or you can even get them primed. I have personally done primed doors from them. They're great. The primer is super smooth. All I have to do is lightly scuff it with a Scotch-Brite, and I'm putting on top coat. Again, for those of you who know, who've at least done this a little bit, maybe there's some guys out there who've done cabinets, but they just haven't quite figured out the logistics and the technicalities of how they're going to make it work for them in their little shop. For those of you who haven't done that, finishing is a huge step, right? And the finish has to be good. That's what customers see, right? Especially doors. Doors are the things they see, touch. They're at eye level. They got to look really, really good. So I'm just not going to mess with it. This guy, I I don't think I need plans for this. It's pretty generic. I think it's about 2 foot by 3 foot wide top. It's got a Craig plate that I mounted right in the middle of it. This top is MDF. I used the old 2 parts polyurethane to 1 part mineral spirits trick, and I put several coats on and sanded with 220 between each one. And when I was done, I waxed it, and it's really durable. If you want to do the same thing, but you want to, get some contact cement, and you want to, or if you use contact adhesive, let me just give you a little trick here. Buy the spray can. For something this small, the spray can's really easy. Rolling on the contact cement, I hate that stuff. I hate rolling it on. The rollers, you can never find the right rollers to put it on with. They make special rollers that work really good. The spray stuff's just easier. Just get you the little can. It's probably expensive, but get you a little can of 3M crap. You can shoot it on here. You can shoot it on your laminate. But yeah, you can put laminate on this. It's a great option. And as far as router bits, I love White Sides router bits, right? White Sides are like my homies. I love their stuff. They have great prices, great products. If I'm not saying that there aren't other ones out there. I've got several CMT orange bits. I've got several Freud bits, but White Sides are my guys. They're really great to deal with too. So that being said, we've covered the table saw. We've covered the router table. These are like the 2 big things, right, for making for building cabinets. If you've got those 2, you're sitting pretty. I know you're probably looking through the camera, or you're looking at the screen right now, and you see I got a bandsaw back here. I never use it. I have a really nice planer here. I've got a bird Sheelix cutter head in this. Guess what? You don't need it. Even though I love that thing, I don't need it. And that's another thing we're going to talk about: milling material. Okay, milling material. You don't need to do it. Um, if you buy rough sawn wood and you don't get an edge straight lined and you don't get it slightly planed down, you're just spending a ton of time that you don't need to. Again, it's kind of like the building doors thing. There are people who can mill your materials down for you better than you can. Heck, so at a minimum, get your stuff milled to 13/16 and straight lined one side. So that means that one of the edges is going to be straight because they've got a straight line saw and they cut it. And then you're milling that down to 13/16, and then you can just sand that from there. Or if you want to run it through your small planer just to get it down to size and give it a nicer finish, because the industrial planers usually don't leave a nice finish. They can have chip out. You can do that. That's at a minimum, minimum do that. Or the places that you buy doors from, right? Door suppliers, those guys will sell you cabinet components too. Heck, they'll send you 1.5 by 3/4 inch face frame stock that's been sanded and sized, and it's just like beautiful, right? It's ready to go. And the only thing you have to do is, after you're done dadoing it and making your face frames, is probably just hit it with an orbital just to make sure that it doesn't have linear scratch pattern from the big wide belt sander that they sized it on. And then you're just going to break the edges and it's done. I mean, that's a great option. Now, again, with that stuff, what people do is they look at that stuff and go, oh man, it's expensive. Man, they're like, oh, these doors, man, they're expensive. And oh man, that face frame material, that's expensive. It's probably $2 a linear foot for, face frame material nowadays. That's probably what it is. If you want maple, it's probably $2 a linear foot. And you know what? It might be a little bit more than that with shipping. But what they are doing here, see, what we are doing here is we look at that and we say it's expensive because we're able to easily quantify it. When you're down here and you're doing this stuff in your shop, are you down here tracking how much time it takes you to mill up material? Are you tracking the time it takes you to build doors? I mean, are you really breaking it down and seeing how much it costs you? Because, a lot of people don't do that. And so because it's something that isn't measured, because there's no quantity to it, people tend to think that it's cheaper, and it's not. It's stuff will eat you alive. Because those guys got the big fancy equipment, you better believe they can build doors cheaper than I can, okay? Because when you are a one-man shop or even a two-man shop, we're kind of getting off topic from the router table, but where we're going at with all of this whole idea that we're getting into, right, is profitability over cash flow. And this is the one thing that killed me. I was profitable, right? My business, my jobs were profitable, but I was hardly making any money because I spent so much time earning the profit, and I turned a profit, okay? I didn't have sufficient cash flow. You could have, I could make, in most businesses, okay, so where I work right now, I work for a big industrial manufacturing company at the moment, right? They shoot for 20% profit margin, right? So they want to make 20%, the business, after everybody's paid, 20%, okay? And you might think, well, that doesn't seem like that's a lot. Well, you got to remember that what they are doing is they are pushing out tons and tons, I mean, just millions of dollars worth of stuff, okay, in a month, millions of dollars of stuff in a month, okay? If you have your little cabinet shop, you could be making 200% profit margin. You could be making an insane profit margin and go broke because it takes you half a year to hit that, okay? Cash flow is our friend. Profitability is good, but you have to know the difference between profits and cash flow, okay? So you can tolerate a lower profit margin and still be winning and doing great and be successful because you're able to get jobs out the door. You're able to have good quality, good word of mouth. Jobs are stacking up. People want you to do work for them, right? Cash flow. Okay, so we need to understand those. So that's kind of one of the driving factors behind the whole Bootstrap cabinet shop, behind doing all this is, one, yeah, we kind of want to have a minimum cost to entry. We don't want to spend too much money. But obviously, when you're starting out, you don't want to waste your time and your money with things that you don't need to be messing with, okay? So that's why I'm here. I'm here to tell you this stuff, right? I know it kind of seems like I go on a tangent from going from router table to we're not making doors and da 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 da, profit, cash flow, all that. But these are essential things. And I'm probably going to do a video at some point explaining the business model a little bit more. And that'll be good because I haven't figured everything out about the business model. And so it's going to poke some holes in it. And you guys can ask questions and leave comments and say, hey, what about this and what about that? And then we'll go back and we'll revisit it and we'll figure it out. It'll be awesome. All right. So we're done talking about the router table. Let's move on to pocket holes. All right, guys. As you can see, I'm just moving on down the line in my basement. This girl right here is a Castle pocket hole machine. Now, this is going to be way out of the budget for pretty much everybody watching this video. And the only reason I have one is because I was fortunate enough to find this at a cabinet shop where I worked. And I said, hey, that's a really good machine. And I was speaking to the owner. I said, hey, it's a really good machine. Why don't you let me fix that up and we can start using that again to build face frames, because I really believe that this is a superior system for pocket holes. And he was like, well, I'll tell you what, why don't I just let you have it? And I was like, okay, well, I'll just have it then. So I brought this guy home. Now, with pocket holes, right, you're going to be using pocket holes for face frames. And that's pretty much the only thing we use pocket holes for, right? In the Bootstrap shop, I'm not a fan of pocket hole carcass construction. However, with this machine, I could do it, but that's not very fair to you guys because, I mean, I don't know. You buy one of these suckers used, you're still looking like $2,500, right? This is like twice the price of your, you know, nice table saw, right? So this is just a little bit too expensive. However, we've got a little surprise with this. I figured out how to build one of these, and they're pretty easy. They're very simple, so you can actually replicate this and make one of these in your own shop. Have a little lever on the side. You can operate it, work really good. We'll get to that later. But when you're doing face frames, you're doing pocket hole joinery, the thing we're going to focus on is going to be, what's available to you, right? So you can start with a Craig jig, right? Everybody's got a Craig jig anymore. I don't think you're even allowed to, own a table saw without having a Craig jig first. This is the basic model, right? They've made 20 different versions of these through the years. This is the very manual version, right? Craig even has one now. It's a little battery-powered hand-operated doohickey that you just set it on the plywood. I saw that the other day when I was looking at extruded aluminum fences from them. You can get these in about any kind of brand, any kind of flavor. If you do go this route, one thing I would recommend if you're getting a Craig is to buy the cobalt steel bit. This bit has like a dovetail pilot on the end of it. It's a very hard steel, very sharp. It just makes them a lot nicer to deal with, right? It's a lot easier to deal with them. If you have a little bit more money to drop on a pocket hole machine, the Craig Foreman is great. I think they're probably hovering around $400, and they're a good little machine, right? They're great. Now, what I'm about to tell you about the about the Castle machine is not to discourage anyone, because we don't want to get hung up on, oh, I don't have the best pocket hole machine, or, oh, I don't have the best this, and that's really holding me back. A lot of times, in the woodworking sphere, when people are starting out, they get hung up on the thing they don't have. They're like, oh, I would be able to be successful if I had a Festool domino. Like, no, you don't. You don't need a domino, okay? I mean, they're nice. I like them. I'd like to have one, but that's not something that that your success hinges on, okay? So with the pocket holes, you've got the Craig. They run on a drill. With a Castle machine, and Castle I think is the only one that makes these anymore, they use a router bit. So this has a router, an old Porter cable, 1 3/4 horse router in there that actually, when I hit this foot pedal, it's air actuated. I got air compressor that hooks up to this. When you hit the button, there's a router bit, a 3/8 inch router bit that will come up and will route a pocket into your piece of wood. So if you got your piece of wood sticking in here, you hit the foot switch, this router bit flips up and it routes a hole, or it routes a pocket. Then there's a small trim router in the back that pops forward and pre-drills a hole. So the one thing I love about this is you get a really nice pilot hole. You don't really get that with the Craigs. But again, the Craig jig is fine, right? When you're starting out, this is basically all I ever had to build face frames on. I've technically never built face frames with this Castle machine. I've done a little bit of stuff here and there, but I was kind of out of the game before I got this thing up and running. But what I want to talk to you about, and I'm working on this, and I'm sorry I don't have it yet, but I'm working on it, is we can build one of these, okay? These are very simple. It's not complex. So I'm going to be working on that, right? I'm going to give you the plans for the slider. I'm going to have the my files for my cabinets and stuff uploaded, and so that everybody can see them. And you know what? The cabinet files and things like that. I'm probably just going to give you guys access to the files, and you're just going to have to look at them. I don't really have prints that I've sat down and made these really pretty prints because I'm not selling them. Okay, these aren't pretty prints that I'm here to sell. I'm here to give you guys information, but at the same time, I really actually like making prints in a previous life, and kind of now, yet still, I'm a draftsman. So I'm pretty good at making prints, and I like making prints, and I'm real particular, making them look really good and all that. But it takes a lot of time to do that. So I'm not going to be making prints for the cabinets. I'm going to make probably just bare minimum design plans for the sliding table saw. I'm going to do the same with this, just enough to get you guys by. I'm probably going to put them out there. And again, because they're free, I'm probably going to have some people ask questions and we're going to get feedback on, and I'll have to clarify some things. And, maybe I don't know that I'm going to do a build video. I'm having a hard time just doing these videos where I talk at the camera right now. But this system is I believe is very superior, and the reason being bringing this back in is because these work on some slightly different mechanics. I mean, obviously this is a router, this is a drill, but the Craig uses a 15-degree angle for the pocket. Okay, now if you've used pocket holes very long, you know that you kind of gotta cheat them a little bit because they'll want to shift on you. Especially when you're doing face frames. This is a challenge you'll get into when you're building face frames for cabinets. Your joints are going to be offset, and then you got to sand them down, and that can cause problems because if you're using a sander with a soft pad, it's going to round the edges of your face frame over, and they don't look very nice. Right? These are the things you run into, guys. Okay, but they can all be fixed. They can all be taken care of. However, with a Castle machine, that's a 6-degree pocket, right? It's a 6-degree angle that screw goes into. The nice thing about that is with this, you've got a lot more room. You can actually kind of wiggle the panel around and adjust them more. They bite super hard. I have never had one of these want to break out the end of a face frame or break out the end of a piece of wood. It's just better. It's really is. It's a better setup. I'm not trying to make it sound like, hey, you shouldn't do anything until I finally release the plans for this or you figure out how to make one. Like, no, get started, right? If you have the little manual pocket hole jig like the Craig here, guess what? We're only using pocket holes for face frames, so it's not going to hurt you that bad, right? Or get you the Foreman, the little Craig Foreman. That's a great little machine, right? Just get one of those, it's fine. And then eventually you can upgrade to something like this. Now, if you can find one of these used for a deal and you want to fix it up, go for it. They're awesome. But they're also when you look inside these things, see how they work. They're super simple, and so I know that we can actually replicate one of these and actually make one that's foot powered that you hook up an air compressor and it's automated and everything. Um, we can do all that. It's not that hard. So pocket holes, routers, table saws. We are going to probably get into some bits. Obviously, there's more tools that you need than that, but these are the essentials, right? I haven't gotten into finishing tools yet. We're going to do a whole separate video on finishing. You're going to need some other hand tools, obviously, a screwdriver. I'm sorry, an electric screwdriver, and I don't mean like a little Black and Decker electric screwdriver. I mean like I have a DeWalt screwdriver. It looks like an impact driver or a drill. All it is it's got a 1/4-inch drive that has various torque settings on. It's got a clutch on it. Those are nice for assembling things so that you don't over torque them. Excuse me. Using an impact driver to run screws for face frames it's not ideal. You can easily overdrive them, especially with the super powerful impact drivers that they have nowadays. It's easy to just I pulled the trigger a little too long, and you just shot that screw out the back side of that face frame. So those electric screwdrivers, the one I got is a little 12 volt. It's cheap. Uh, Drills, things like that. There's all that other stuff you need too. But the big things, kind of the big expensive items, this is going to take care of you, right? If you've got this, yeah, you're going to need a sander and stuff. We're going to talk about all those bits. We're going to talk about how to do all this other stuff and all the little technicalities. We'll get to it. But these are pretty much the big things you got to worry about. You don't really, and honestly, you don't need a planer. That's probably gonna ruffle some feathers, but you don't. I would actually buy, knowing what I know now, I would buy a drum sander before I bought a planer. But we're done. We're done with this for now, right? But this isn't. We're not talking about drum sanders. We're not talking about planers right now. We covered the three big things. We'll go back and talk about some more stuff. I appreciate you for bearing with me in this, and I hope this has been really helpful. I want to put some more stuff together. Please ask questions, comment, like, subscribe, pass it on. Get your friends who know way more about cabinets than me to come in and go, hey, what about this and what about that? And pick this stuff apart, right? Pick it apart, find the problems, demand answers. That's, sometimes I get blinded to these things. And so if you guys can come up with stuff that you want to know, or maybe say, hey, that doesn't work, poke holes in it, that's how we're going to grow this. We're going to develop. I want to say thank you to everybody who has subscribed and commented so far. Some really cool people. It's a very, very small little group, but you know what? You guys are awesome. I really appreciate all the comments and the well wishes and the things that have been shared. We had one of the guys that commented here just a couple days ago was sharing how he has done commercial work. He's worked for contractors. He's done this and that, and just gave a really nice little kind of a synopsis of his experience so far, and saying that hey, he wants to have a go at this for himself. That's really cool. People sharing their experiences like that, because we can learn from that. There's always little tidbits in there that we can learn from. So don't be afraid to share. I love hearing people talk about what they want to do. Even if you have no experience, that's fine. I'm here to teach. I do this because I feel like I have something to share with people. I feel like I have a perspective that's not being talked about on YouTube, but however, is a common perspective in the cabinet industry. But for those you have not been in the industry, or maybe you can't afford to go, get paid $15 an hour to work in a cabinet shop, that's kind of the situation I was in. I couldn't take a pay cut to go learn how to build cabinets in a cabinet shop, so I had to figure stuff out. I had friends that helped me who were professional cabinet makers, and eventually I did work in the shop, and that really opened my eyes. But unfortunately, I can't just run off and go, okay, well, wife and kids, we'll just make, you know, $25,000 less a year, and it'll be all great, and I'll go learn to make cabinets. Even though that's essentially what I did when I started my own shop, but that's a story for another day. So thank you. Stay tuned. We hope to have more stuff out there, more files, more designs, more ideas, more stuff to share. We'll see you again on the Bootstrap Cabinet Shop.